I know this video is definitely a few days too late, but as I'm writing the script, it is the 13th anniversary of Xenoblade releasing on Wii in Japan. Happy anniversary to this amazing game and the start to my favorite franchise ever. And to think that there's a timeline out there where this game never released outside of Japan is a crazy thought. Europe got it a year later after its Japan release, and the US almost never got this game if it were not for dedicated fans starting Operation Rainfall. And now this game is considered to be one of the best games in the JRPG genre and is considered to be a modern masterpiece by many. It is my second favorite game of all time. Its breathtaking world and story has captured so many people, but in my honest opinion, the gameplay is as important to this game as its narrative, and yet somewhere down the line after all these years, people started dragging on its battle system. Many people consider it to be the worst part of the game, and I've even seen people drop the game because they didn't like the combat. I can somewhat see where they're coming from. It was their first attempt at this battle system and it would see multiple improvements and revisions in the upcoming sequels. But I highly disagree that any of these battle systems replaced what Xenoblade 1's combat did for its game. It is still unique and it fits this game in particular perfectly, and I would never want to replace it. I do not only think this battle system is good, I even think it has advantages over Xenoblade 3's combat system that so many people consider to be peak Xenoblade combat. So yes, I think Xenoblade Chronicles combat is underrated, and I hope to convince you in this video. As always, real quick before I jump into the video, thank you so much for all the support over the past months. This is a very new and small channel, so I appreciate every comment and like, and of course, don't forget to leave a subscription. So to start things off, of course I will be talking about Definitive Edition, because it improved the gameplay experience for battles and it didn't change any major mechanics or stats at all. Let's go over the important changes. The visual clarity improved immensely, enemy tags are now fixed on the upper screen, we actually get a health bar instead of numbers, Break Topple Launch finally have bar indicators, all debuffs and buffs are listed on the portraits, visual indicators for positionals, and thankfully, finally, visual indicators for enemies with spikes. There are a few more tweaks that you can read all about here, but basically it just made our lives way easier, so that's what we are going with. Let's go. Xenoblade's combat starts very simple and only unfolds the more characters join your party. In the beginning you are first introduced to the combat with Dunban only having 2 arts. When you start a battle, your character attacks automatically for you if you are in range, and you are basically waiting for your art cooldowns to activate and use a very strong attack. I think the game plays it very safe in the beginning. You can't lose or be overwhelmed here. The one art is a party buff and the other one is a very strong attack. Then the second tutorial plays when you gain control over Shulk and his junk sword. Your 2 arts now are backslash and light heal, but you gain a new special attack called Talent Art with Turn Strike that only fills up when your auto attack connects. So maybe you should wait to do an auto attack before spamming your art so that you can fill up your special. Then one of the most important mechanics of the game is finally introduced: aggro. The combat is very reminiscent to MMOs and every character fulfills a role here. Defenders are built to tank and evade enemy attacks and gather lots of aggro so that the enemies target them. Attackers want to dish out a lot of damage but don't want to get targeted because they die easily, and healers want to stay out of range and heal the party. Of course the characters can do way more than what their role tells them to do, and in this game specifically the defenders want to actually dish out the most damage in the first place. This is because aggro is accumulated by how much damage the enemy receives from the character, as well as other factors like arts building up aggro specifically and healers gaining lots of aggro by healing. Defenders gaining aggro has also other benefits, because every art in this game has bonus effects. As I said, some arts are there to gain extra aggro, and Shulk arts here do extra damage and have other benefits when used from a certain position. Shulk's backslash deals 2 times more damage when attacking the enemy from the rear, so you want your buddy Reyn here to take the aggro so that Shulk can get behind the enemy and get massive damage. Shulk gains more arts as you level up, with Slit Edge lowering physical defense when hitting the enemy from the side and so on. By the way, the positionals only count in the moment the hit connects, so if an enemy turns around during the animation, you are out of luck. And this is your slow introduction into the battle system. Do an auto attack, get the special attack and wait for your cooldowns to do more arts. As I said, it was the introduction to this battle system and they played it relatively safe, but I also think this gives a lot of people the wrong first impressions. Auto attacks are less involved and most people spam their damage art and then just wait for them to be off cooldown to spam them again. It gives the impression that there isn't much to the battle system at first glance. The game tries to teach you that you can actually play with other characters very early by forcing you to play Fiora for a bit and then later forcing you to play as Melia, but I think one of the biggest problems I notice with people who don't like the battle system is that once they get control over Shulk again, they never switch to other characters. Shulk has a lot of benefits that we will get into later, but also he has the most basic fighting style of all characters. He mostly focuses on positionals and is supporting the team with Monado and other buffs. I like his playstyle a lot, but playing him for the entire 100 plus hours you spent in this game of course will get tiring. People like being comfortable with what they know and will never switch to other characters trying to understand their playstyle, because let me tell you, they play completely different. Staying Shulk for the entire game is like picking Noah in his default class in Xenoblade 3 and never switching classes or characters. If you want to fully enjoy what the game has to offer, I highly recommend playing as different characters. Try them all in fact, yes, even Sharla. I want to go back a bit and talk about the basic mechanics of the battle system. You only play as the one character you selected before the battle, but team play is very important. We already talked about the roles and how defenders work, but even as an attacker you can help the team with something called affinity calls. Tension and affinity play a big hidden role in this game. The portraits of the characters have different stages from sad to very fired up. This is called tension and actually plays a way bigger role in this game than many people think. With low tension, most attacks you do miss and the crit rate is also reduced dramatically. With high tension you gain critical hit rate and damage up and also do up to 20% more damage during chain attacks. It also highly increases your chance to get more chain links and continue the chain attack. It is very important to at least keep your team at normal tension, and if they are sad you can walk up to them and cheer them on. You also need to help them up if they are suffering Topple and other status effects. This is also the only way to revive fallen characters if you have enough party gauge. You can also warn them, but I will get into that later. Tension also is really important for fighting higher level enemies. It's actually one of the gameplay decisions of the game that I don't like. In this game, if an enemy is 6 level higher than you, then its enemy bar will turn red and it will drop your stats against them drastically. With a 120 decrease in hit and evasion rate, it makes fighting against them almost impossible. Instead of making the battles naturally harder, they nerf you to a point where it just feels unfair, and if you are 6 levels higher, it's the exact opposite and they are no threat at all. Definitive Edition added a perfect expert mode that lets you level up and down as you wish. I highly recommend using it. No XP is ever lost, you will still level up from fights, but it saves up every EXP from quest and exploration, so if you ever feel too strong or too weak, you can balance it out. This needs to return in future games, please. Now let's look at how strategy plays a big role in this game and how I feel it even exceeds at this more than Xenoblade 3. Xenoblade 1 doesn't shy away from story related gameplay features and restrictions, and I think this is what makes it the most unique battle system out of them all. It begins with the introduction to the Mechon, mechanical beings unable to be damaged by normal weapons. When you first try to fight against them without the Monado, you are only doing 1 damage with every attack. The counter to this is trying to break, then topple them so they can get vulnerable again. This is another great reason why team play is important in this game. Not every character can break and topple enemies. At this point in the game and with most team combinations, it is important to use characters that have specific arts for that. Shulk can break and Reyn can topple enemies, and the order of which arts you perform is important too. Topple only works after an enemy has been broken, so you need to work together as a team to make it happen. This is where party member AI can really screw you over. If you break with Shulk, Reyn could be doing a completely different art at the time and use Topple way too late. Now his art needs to come back from the cooldown, and so even if you break the enemy now multiple times, Reyn won't be able to activate the Topple. Very early this can lead to frustratingly long battles, but this can be countered by smart party selection and plays. It is only this one time that you are limited to battles without the Monado together with Break Topple being necessary. So if you get here, I highly recommend playing as Reyn. Shulk will always break enemies easily because he has 2 arts for it that have way less cooldown. So by playing Reyn, you can limit the risk of messing up the important Topple. If an enemy has lots of strong debuffs, you can play as Sharla that has debuff counters instead of relying on AI. If an enemy has lots of physical defense, you can make a party for ether attacks and so on. Building a good party and choosing the right character to play with the right arts can make all the difference, and this gives the game a whole nother layer of strategy that, for example, Xenoblade 3 is missing. This is not a drag on Xenoblade 3, and this is not the point of the video, but I will use it as an example. You have 6 characters on the field at all time with multiple arts being able to break Topple launch and make other useful buffs that there's hardly any tactic to it. You don't need to switch to party members or make strategic plays because they happen automatically even without your contribution. You are part of a big party doing their own stuff and you chime in to do your part. It feels completely different in Xenoblade 1. If you didn't break Topple days, it was because you didn't make the right party for it. It is because you didn't hear Reyn shouting his Topple art before you used your break. You have to work together to make this work. One of the best checkpoints to see if you truly understand the mechanic are in fights against face Mechons, especially Zord in chapter 5. Once again, weapons only do 1 damage against them and you need to start a chain attack to topple him first. It teaches you to fight the other weak enemies first to fill up your party gauge. You can do that by landing positionals or doing crits, as well as getting burst affinity, which happens randomly when you crit, evade or miss during a battle. When the gauge is full, you can focus your chain attack on Zord to topple him and finish him off. If you are going into this fight without a strategy and not understanding the basic battle mechanics, it's gonna take forever. Let's talk about chain attacks. Chain attacks transform the battle into a strategic combo attack. All your arts except Talent's arts will become available and you can attack with every teammate in order. If you missed the break or topple before, you can now select them back to back for a guaranteed topple on the enemy. For big enemies it is even required to use chain attacks. Topple is not only good against Mechon, it is also amazing for normal enemies. When an enemy is toppled, it can't attack you and you have guaranteed 100% accuracy as well as critical damage being increased by 25%. Now if you manage 2 days after the topple, aggro will not increase and it will cancel their current attack spell. But it is actually the worst thing to do in a chain attack. You see, chain attacks have a damage multiplier right here. Times 2 gives you 100% more damage and max gives you 700% more damage. This is actually the thing you need to focus on. To increase the chain multiplier, you have to use arts with the same color. And break topple days are 3 completely different colors that will not increase your damage output. So it is better for damage to use 3 red arts back to back instead of going for the break topple days. But that doesn't mean you should never go for the topple combo, as I explained its benefits earlier. By truly understanding the chain attack, you can do massive damage and it's super fun to use with different team combinations. You see, the combo multiplier actually resets to ×1 if you ever switch the color of the current chain, which you think would make characters that only have 1 red art bad, but there is a way. Talent arts are grey and can be used at any point during the chain multiplier. It will not reset the combo, in fact now you can switch the color to be a different one and continue to dish out max damage. That makes Melia one of the greatest middle women in history. Her talent art should always be available most of the time, making switching colors easy. When you reach max on the combo meter, then it's time to dish out the big attacks with backslash, sword bash, blossom dance and ether attacks that do massive damage over time. You can also use AoE attacks more efficiently that way. Also, never worry about using chain attacks too early on multiple enemies. With every enemy you defeat in the chain, you gain a whole bar back in the party gauge. If you can kill 3 enemies in the chain, it is completely full again. This makes chain attacks flow a lot better than just using it for one final enemy. So I've talked a lot about how good chain attacks are in this game. Now I have to address its biggest flaw. It is actually RNG if you can continue the chain after the first 3 rounds. This is a massive blow and revisioned in later games. The affinity and tension between party members is key to this. Early in the game you will hardly do more than 4 chain orders, but the more affinity the characters gain, the more you pay attention to the tension, the easier it will get. But even at full affinity and full tension, the chain still can drop at the worst time possible. I don't feel like making the order fixed would have solved anything, but that means it will remain the most frustrating part about this battle system for me, sadly. I don't know how many minutes we are already in this video, and I still haven't touched on the mechanic that makes this the most unique battle system out of any RPG out there. Visions. As I already said, the game doesn't shy away from restricting and adding to the gameplay for story reasons. Normal weapons can't damage Mechons. The Monado can't cut people before a later transformation that you will only be able to encounter like 2 times. It cuts off major areas forever because of story events, but the most important story related gameplay addition are visions. When Shulk picks up the Monado, he starts having visions of the future. It can be immediate threats or even larger events that play in the future. In battle, this means if an enemy is about to perform a dangerous attack, Shulk's vision will activate even if he is not actively in the party, and you have 8 to 10 seconds to do something about it. That's where Shulk's Monado arts come into play. This is also a good point to talk about enemy attacks. Enemies can use physical arts, ether arts, and even talent arts like your party. This is also the only game in the series where the enemies can chain attack you instead. Talent arts are shown with a white text and a Roman numeral behind them. They are the most threatening attacks the enemy can do. Your best choice of action here is to use Shulk's Monado armor to completely counter the enemy's talent art. It does need to be leveled up to the Roman numeral or higher for it to actually work. Red arts are physical arts that can be countered with Monado speed that increases your agility, but it doesn't guarantee a dodge. Physical defense and buffs are also a great counter to it. Purple arts are ether attacks and the hardest to counter. You can't dodge ether based attacks, your only option is to buff ether defense or heal the person to survive the hit. These are of course not your only options. Melia has an art that allows her to reflect any upcoming arts for a few seconds except talent arts. Dunban has an aura named Jaws of Death that revives him automatically if he gets killed during it, and so forth. You don't actually need Shulk in your party to counter every upcoming threat, but the Monado arts definitely make it easier. So what do you do when you don't have Shulk in the party? As I said, you don't need him to have visions for the battle, but what if a party member gets targeted? The game allows you to go and warn the party member. Now all of their arts are available, so if you need Dunban to activate his aura, or you activate Sharla to heal quickly, that's how you do it. The problem with warning party members is that for some odd reason, it's the same button prompt as cheering a party member on, which can lead to accidental activation, and it also uses a whole party bar which could be used to revive the party member instead. So honestly, most of the time it's only useful if Shulk is in your party and you are playing as someone else, so you have to warn him to activate a Monado art, or if you want to guarantee a break Topple days, because days will also break the vision tags. One of the biggest problems with visions is the music that interrupts the actual banger. One of the biggest problems with visions is that enemies still can swap targets before the time elapses. So if you use Monado speed to save someone else from an attack and the enemy starts targeting you instead, you are kinda screwed. This of course can be avoided if you truly understand aggro management, and even can be used effectively to switch the targeted person to be the defender instead of the vulnerable character. I truly feel by limiting the player to only 3 characters, with each playing a unique role and having to make tactical decisions based on the current situation thanks to visions, while also allowing helping, warning and chain attacks, make for a better strategic team play than allowing you to do and use everything all the time. You feel great avoiding killing blows by exploiting the options available to you. And every team combination handles visions differently. Also, depending on your team you choose, it might be wise to change the character's arts to better fit the team. I usually don't have Electric Guardbuster on Dunban, but it turned out to be super useful in a team with Melia and Sharla. Let's touch real quick on the arts and bonuses now. Shulk has 8 normal arts and gains 8 more Monado arts, but other characters have to pick and choose which of their many arts they want to use. The colors of the arts are mostly useful for chain attacks, but red arts will always be physical, while purple are exclusively ether. Blue count as support arts, and orange means it's an aura. Pink is always used for break arts, green means topple, and yellow is daze. But you don't have to actually pay too much attention to the colors to know which attacks are ether based. Every ether attack has a colored line running through the art icon. This also applies to talent arts that are ether based. This is of course useful to know because some enemies have massive defense against physical attacks. Other enemies only attack when they sense ether being used, and of course ether has also the benefits such as never missing and still damaging Mechon even without the Monado. You can tell if the attack has an area of effect if it has a fan in the icon. This means it will hit in a fan shaped area in front of you, and if it has a circle underneath it, it means it hits the area around you. You can also look out for these icons on enemy attacks to determine if they hit area of effect or not. This is sadly not always the case for ether arts. There you actually have to pay attention to the art description to tell you if they are AoE or not. Also there are other useful indicators such as bleed and way more. Auras are a hidden gem for this battle system. Even though Dunban can have like 5 auras or so, you can only have 1 active at a time. I wish they would have done more with them, like allowing other characters to receive auras, but as it stands right now, it's still really useful for the cast that has them. This is a great transition to the next topic I want to touch on. Buffs and debuffs play a way bigger role in this game than any of its sequels. This includes fan favorites like spike damage as well. Of course I'm joking, everyone hates spikes, but in my opinion they do add a great layer of strategy. For example, if they use topple spikes, it means that you have to work around not to topple the enemy and try to defeat it with other ways. And if an enemy has topple spikes, they usually break very easily, so that's where good team play and art selection comes into play once again. On the other hand, some enemies have spikes that can be neutralized by toppling them, which gives the opposite incentive. It only really gets difficult when an enemy has spikes and is very hard to topple. Equipment can come in very handy here. I haven't even addressed equipment yet. The game has a ton of gems you can put on armor and weapons. I sadly think that most of the defensive gems are way too situational to always equip them, so I mostly stick with buffs and agility. Agility is the best stat of this game because it also determines your hit accuracy that is very important against higher level enemies. Also, I highly recommend using quickstep on characters you are controlling. Sacrificing a gem slot for faster walking speed is always a worthwhile trade if you ask me. One of the problems that the game didn't address is that you can't stop auto-attacking if you want to. Even while you try to run out of reach, the character will attack and probably get killed by spikes. Some people prefer to be able to move and attack at the same time, which was removed in later games, but the game should at least accommodate for that fact by giving you the option to hold down a button to stop attacking. Monado Purge can neutralize spike effects, but that basically puts Shulk in a loop to auto-attack to get Purge back and then use it again, which is not ideal. I feel like there are some fights where it really is necessary to play as Shulk without completely rebuilding your team equipment, which could have been avoided. This maybe goes into a bigger problem that Shulk feels necessary for a lot of fights. I told you that even without Shulk you can manage dodging visions, and later I even fight Mechons without the Monado, but Monado arts make it way easier. I think the biggest problem occurs when Telethia are introduced. They have an aura named Soul Read, which basically gives them 100% evasion for a long period. And fighting them without Shulk is basically impossible. Yes, I know Melia gets an art that seals that as well, but you have to be in trance for it and it has massive cooldown and it still limits party builds completely. Basically, if you don't purge Telethia or even worse, don't have Monado arts ready yet when the Telethia activates Soul Read, you are screwed. You see, to actually activate Monado arts you need to connect auto attacks, but the Telethia dodges everything. So now you are literally doing nothing waiting for the Soul Read to disappear, which can take like 5 minutes. They tried to give you a solution when Shulk gets Battle Soul that exchanges HP for the special gauge, but even this doesn't completely fill your Monado specials, and now you have to wait for the Battle Soul to recharge. I think this is my least favorite part about the battle system. Of course, if you already know what you have to do, you will save your Monado arts until it activates Soul Read and then make sure to have Monado arts ready for the next time. But if you mess up once, it drags on for no reason and it still limits you to only play as Shulk. They could have easily fixed this by at least allowing auto attacks to connect and give more characters the chance to break the aura, but they didn't, and now here we are. So yes, you basically use Purge to get rid of enemy buffs most of the time, and they can also inflict debuffs on the party. I really like how you can help party members out of Topple and Confuse, and if you don't pay attention and start to activate a chain attack, they won't be able to participate. You have to pay attention to your team, and buffs are perfect for that. Sharla will help you get immunity buffs and other helpful stuff, but the most important character for buffs is of course Melia. And this is the perfect transition into my last section of the video. I want to talk about character specifics and playstyles, starting of course with Melia. Melia is very confusing to play for new players because her playstyle is very unique. While some people at IGN might think that makes her the worst character in the game, she actually is one of the best if you know how to use her.
The stoic and inscrutable Duncan.
Yes, the IGN jab had to comment at some point. Anyway, most of Melia's arts don't do any damage when used. She can summon elements that act as buffs for the party. As long as this element is above her head and she is close enough to the character, the buff will stay forever. Fire is used to buff physical attacks, lightning for ether attacks, wind for agility, earth for physical defense, and so on. She can only summon 3 elements at a time though, so to switch it up or do any damage to the enemy, she has to fire them with her talent art. This will remove the buff effects on the party, but in return do the dedicated attack of the element. Fire now does AoE damage and also inflicts burn. Lightning does massive ether damage, earth does poison, etc. The basic strategy I use is having one good buff always active while firing 2 elements for damage. But this is only one strategy. She can also be a super good healer because water can heal a lot of damage over time. If you want to focus on healing, agility or attack power, it's up to you, making every battle unique. Where she really excels at are the chain attacks as I mentioned before. Her talent art can always extend the damage multiplier and also help switch colors mid chain attack. If you manage to hit the max level and fire a damage over time attack like burn, poison or ice, the enemy will literally melt when the chain ends. And the best part is that even if you are not playing as Melia and start a chain, she will almost always have 3 elements available. That's because her AI sucks. Or does it? A common criticism of this game is that the team AI really stinks. For example, Melia will rarely actually fire her elements. She will just have the buffs active all the time. But that's exactly why chain attacks with her in the team are always amazing. Listen, I wouldn't mind more control over the party dynamic at all. The game provides you with 3 commands that help you get control over your team. If you hold ZR, you can command them to either focus on a single target, engage at will, or stop attacking and follow you. There is a button left that could have easily been used to command them to not use AoE attacks and preserve important arts, and it would have fixed a lot of AI stuff. But as it stands right now, dealing with what your team decides to do is another part that you have to pay attention to. This was actually addressed in Xenoblade X with giving way too many options for battle commands, even though the party played barely a role in this game. I think to this day, even with Xenoblade 3, they haven't perfected the command system, and I would love to see it evolve in the next game. All this rant to say that Melia's AI kinda sucks at doing damage, but in my opinion it doesn't bother me as much as Shulk's AI. Shulk's Monado arts are kinda important for battle control and he just does them without a thought or strategy at all. Using enchant on non-Mechon enemies doesn't do anything, but Shulk's AI will keep doing it. Then when you actually need to use Monado's shield, you have to sacrifice a party bar to actually want him to do it. He also uses Battle Soul like way too often and dies because of it. Thankfully there is a countermeasure. You can actually completely remove arts from the characters. Removing or organizing arts for AI is really important. Another good example here is Riki. His Say Sorry art is really good for physical damage. It completely removes debuffs but deals extra damage for every debuff that was already applied. Well, the problem is that it removes debuffs that could be super useful for damage over time attacks, and more importantly, Topple and Daze are also considered debuffs as well. So when the AI decides to use it randomly, it can completely throw off your strategy you had going. This is an amazing art when you are controlling Riki, but sucks if the AI has it. Riki is actually one of the most powerful characters. His HP being a developer joke that they kept in on purpose makes him a great tank. He can heal pretty decently and even has stuff like Happy Happy that fills the party gauge. He is basically an all-rounder, but my main strategy with Riki is to exploit Say Sorry. He can inflict bleed, poison, burn, and Freeze on his own, which are all debuffs that help say sorry a lot, especially during chain attacks. Giving him red and pink arts for chain attacks is also super helpful, because he is one of the most difficult characters to manage in a chain attack in my opinion. Dunban specializes in evasion tanking, but he also does incredible damage. He is one of the few characters that can break Topple and even Daze on their own. Blinding Blossom helps draw aggro, and Serene Heart is amazing because it increases evasion. These are the arts that I almost always have on him, but I change his build a lot. He has other incredible auras like Peerless that gives party-wide attack up, or stuff like Jaws of Death, which is very situational but helps a lot against super bosses. Generally, you have to remember that he can only have one active aura at a time, so deciding which auras to put on his kit is always important. You play him mostly by starting Gale Slash, because using Worldly Slash, Electric Gutbuster and Tempest Kick combo into it with additional effects. Using Tempest Kick has another amazing effect that puts Dunban with the back to the enemy, which allows him to activate Thunder to daze the enemy immediately even without a topple. This breaks vision tags and also gives you time to recover. Of course, his damage excels in chain attacks, especially with Blossom Dance. If you manage to activate his talent art at max damage, it will annihilate everything, and the last hit is even AoE. I've already touched on Shulk, Reyn and Sharla, so I'm not gonna spend too much time here. I especially went already in depth for Shulk. So for Reyn, I think it doesn't really matter what other arts you want on his kit, as long as you have Berserker to Magnum Charge that both boost attack immensely and combo into Sword Drive that literally is the single most hard hitting attack in the game. If you manage to get this in chain attacks, it feels absolutely incredible. And as stated before, he really wants to make the most damage to keep the aggro. For Sharla on the other hand, you need Metal Blast and Headshot just to be able to continue chain attacks. Drive Boost reduces art cooldown so much that you can basically spam Thunder Bullets, which is her most powerful ether attack for flying enemies especially. Then the other support arts are up to you. I prefer at least having 2 healing arts in combination with Cure Round, but other situations would benefit stuff like Shield Bullet for surviving. Sharla is infamous for being the worst character to actually play in this game. Her talent art is the worst by far. It can never be used in chain attacks, and more importantly, it is tied to a mechanic that makes her very useless for a long time. Every attack heats up her rifle, and if it gets too hot, she needs to cool it down, sitting like a duck and not being able to do anything. Not only that, if you happen to not notice her cooling off and start a chain attack, she can't participate. I don't think I can defend this mechanic enough to make you love her playstyle, but all I will say is that actually playing her makes things way less frustrating. Also, for the love of God, as soon as you get heatsink, put that gem on. She needs it. For the next section, I want to actually talk about the 7th party member that is considered a spoiler to this day. Well, except from Sakurai. So if you don't want to know, I will give you time to skip to the chapter ahead, okay? Okay, I hope everyone is gone, so let's talk about Fiora. Her playstyle might seem like worse Shulk at first, but it is far from it. The armor you equip on her plays a major role on how you want to play her. I will honestly just jump straight into my favorite setup. Go full haste and double attack. If you pair this with the bleed attack gem and activate her speed shift, you are doing 1,000,000 damage per second. So much that I actually don't need this much, so what I do instead is give her a talent boost gem that halves the auto attack damage but increases talent gauge gain by 10. This basically means I always have her talent art ready super quickly, which does the most damage anyways. It also has another benefit. Using her talent art boosts tension a lot, which allows me to use her final cross immediately. This art not only does massive damage, it is also a guaranteed topple. With the right setup, Fiora can be a DPS god. Her talent art also of course makes her super good for chain attacks. So now let's go back to the non-spoiler part. Don't worry, spoilers are over. So by this point I've spent a lot of time talking about why I love this battle system and why it is so underrated. I went through every single character and why it makes them so great and why team setups are so important, but I have to make a confession. Yes, in my first playthrough I went full Shulk. Yes, my party mostly consisted of Shulk, Reyn and Sharla because I know it worked. I was a fool. Did it hinder my first playthrough of the game? Actually, it didn't. I enjoyed it to the end, even if I struggled against enemies a lot. But let me tell you, once I replayed the game, and unwrap the battle system the game has to offer to its fullest, I never looked back. It makes a world of difference actually playing as the other characters, thinking about what team combinations I want to come up for the next part. Is it the most flexible and advanced and most fun combat there ever was?
Activated.
Inspiration! Here we go! Melia, it's up!
Dunban!
Here I come! Good job, everyone!
In my opinion, it's not. Telethia and the dependence on Shulk in some major areas was maybe not the best decision. Level differences making battles incredibly unbalanced is unfortunate. Spike damage can be frustrating, especially when you come in unprepared. Party AI can sometimes mess you up. Chain attacks being random was super frustrating. Not having more battle commands was sad, and Sharla being unplayable sucks. A lot of stuff that was fixed or revisioned in the upcoming titles. But I will die on the hill that this battle system works perfectly for this specific game, and I wouldn't want any major changes to it. Visions have such a unique gameplay loop to them, especially with different team combinations, and the limitations breathe new strategy into your play in every battle. While in future games like Xenoblade X you can solo almost everything, and in Xenoblade 3 you can rely on your party so much that you don't need to contribute at all, Xenoblade Definitive Edition finds the perfect middle spot of having you play an important role in the battle while still relying on team play and support. Playing different characters in DE is way more meaningful than playing different classes in Xenoblade 3, with each character having a unique playstyle and an important role in the battle. So yes, I full-heartedly believe Xenoblade Definitive Edition's battle system is underrated. In my first playthrough I did it wrong, but I still enjoyed it. But only after exploring it to the fullest I can now make this video giving you the advice to do the same. If you played the game like me for the first time and you think the battle system was just okay, I challenge you right now to start a new replay. Try different team combinations all the time that all require different art palettes for the best play. Challenge yourself to be 5 levels below the target enemy to get the best challenge out of the game, and I guarantee you will enjoy this masterful game even more than before. So it might seem that this is my absolute favorite battle system of all Xenoblade games and that I actually dislike Xenoblade 3's or X's combat, but that is far from the truth. I love all Xenoblade battle system, and one day I want to go fully in depth with Xenoblade X's amazing single character based builds and classes, as well as deep dive into why Xenoblade 3's combat is so clean and well executed. But there's actually one game here that I didn't mention during the video once, and that is Xenoblade 2. To this day, it is my favorite battle system out of all of them, and funnily enough, it is the worst explained battle system out of all of them. So my next deep dive will definitely focus as to why Xenoblade Chronicles 2 has the best battle system that no one likes. Thank you again so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed what I had to say in this video, and happy anniversary to Xenoblade once again. The Xenoblade future seems very bright, and I hope you join me on that ride. And to not miss any new video, definitely don't forget to subscribe. Do it for Nian. See you.